Hi, welcome to Public Speaking and Your Story. My name is Melanie Strout, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager for the School and State Finance Project. Please reach out to myself or Erica Haynes, Director of Community Engagement, at any time if you'd like to connect, have questions, or are interested in more information. We're happy to meet with you virtually or in person. Just shoot us an email and we'd be happy to schedule something. If you haven't already, highly recommend you download our Ed Explorer app. This allows you to access data at your fingertips. The app allows you to look up district and school level data on school performance, finance information, as well as demographics. You can also compare districts and schools throughout the state of Connecticut. A little bit about us, the School and State Finance Project, for those who are not familiar with us. We are a statewide nonprofit organization, and for over 10 years, we have used data to develop policy solutions that ensure all public school students receive an equitable education that supports their learning needs. We work collaboratively with policymakers, school district officials, community leaders, parents, students, and really anyone who's interested in learning how schools are funded and would like to advocate. Our priorities are always students, schools, and communities. We as an organization and a state have a lot to celebrate. Over $750 million have been secured in equitable education funding. The state of Connecticut has fully funded the main education funding formula for the first time in the state's history. And we've been implementing a need-based funding for all public school students for those funded outside of the education cost sharing formula. All right, so let's get into it. And we're going to start with a brief recap of the storytelling workshop, which is part of this series. So if you did not get to see that, I recommend going back and watching that as well. When we tell stories, our brain is more likely to remember than just listening to a list of facts. This is a strategy to ensure that who you want to tell your story to will remember you. When we are talking to decision makers and lawmakers, they are hearing a ton of information every day on a lot of issues. Through your story, you can create connection points between listeners' experience and yourself. When people can identify with you, you become more memorable. Storytelling and advocacy is personal, and so we're going to start with you. You are the expert on your life. Many of the decision makers and lawmakers are not experts in the area that they are actually making laws in. By sharing your story, you will build credibility with who you are talking to. This is ultimately a way to show how a policy or policies are impacting people in reality. Things can sound really good on paper, but they are not always so good in practice. Unfortunately, with policy making, there can be unintended consequences. This is an opportunity to show how the policy is working well, or if it's not. There are many benefits to you and stakeholders when we share our lived experiences. It validates that there is a problem and can serve as evidence of whether a solution is working the way it was intended. It engages individuals in the conversation and ensures representation. So a few things to remember as we develop our story. Knowing your audience is important. If you are speaking with local decision makers, they are likely going to know more about the current situation and will have more context if you are, for example, speaking at a budget hearing for the Board of Education. These members are likely familiar with the schools and have some programs in your community. Whereas if you are testifying at the state level, you are speaking to members of a committee who are from various parts of Connecticut, and you'll need to make a case that is broader. How is this affecting their constituents? Your story should also have a beginning, middle, and an end where you or your child is the main character. It's about finding a balance of connecting experiences also with facts. This doesn't mean you need to have a ton of data or use any complex calculations. This can be as simple as X number of students in Connecticut are food insecure, or X number of students will be impacted by this policy. Let the data underscore your story, not be the main focus. The last part is, what is the solution or outcome? What would it look like if the problem was addressed? We see this as a pick your own ending part of the story. So now that you have some tips on developing your story, next is, how do you actually share it? Because thinking about it and writing it down are not the same as saying it out loud. I do not know one person who doesn't experience some kind of nervousness when they have to speak publicly. Do what works best for you to stay as centered and calm as you can. This can include writing a script or notes, which for timed testimony is really recommended. Practice, practice, practice. This will help you gain confidence the more that you say it, and especially out loud. Also, don't forget to breathe before, during, and after. As you are practicing, consider recording yourself. If you are in person, find one person to make eye contact with, or a place on the wall behind them so you have something to focus on, but are not distracted by everyone else around you. Make sure you take a deep breath before you start, and take a moment to get situated. If you notice that you're not breathing when you're practicing, write it in your script. All right, so now that your story's been prepared, let's talk about what to expect when you're actually testifying at a public hearing. The first step is to register to speak. This may look different depending on the level of government. Starting with public speaking at the state level, the first decision you'll make is to determine whether you will testify in person or virtually via Zoom. The deadline to sign up is 3 p.m. the day before the hearing. If you are speaking at the local level, you will also need to determine if you have an option to testify in person or virtually. This can vary from town to town or even committee. Sometimes public hearings are only in person or only virtual. You will also need to identify if registration is required to speak during public comment time on an agenda. There may also be specific dates and times in which you need to notify the committee that you would like to speak. This information should be available on the town's website. Aside from knowing what you're going to say, there are a few other logistics to be aware of. If you are testifying in person, be sure to arrive early to find parking and locate the meeting room. At the state level, this would be in the Legislative Office Building, or the LOB. And at the local level, the location may vary depending on how many people are anticipated to turn out for a particular meeting. This may be at central office, in your town hall, or maybe at a local school where they have more of an auditorium or a gym with more seating. Highly recommend print or have a copy of your testimony available either on a device like a smartphone or a tablet. If you are testifying virtually, make sure you're going to identify where you're going to take that Zoom call from. Are you going to be sitting in your car? Is there a quiet space at home that you can sit in? You want to be somewhere with minimal background noise and interruptions. Be sure to also install Zoom updates prior to logging in. We know every time we go in, it has some kind of an update, so make sure you do that in advance, as well as double checking the date and time of the hearing. I also recommend having your script or notes printed out or on a separate device. It is very difficult if you're using your phone to have Zoom up and another document at the same time. And so this is a little bit easier with a laptop, but just keeping that technology in mind. We've spent some time thinking about what to say in your testimony. So be sure to introduce yourself. This means your full name, a title if you're representing an organization, and your town of residence. You're going to share your position on the bill. Are you in support or opposition? Do you have any caveats or things that you're cautiously in support of? Then you're going to get into your personal story and wrap it up by repeating your position on the bill, and then encouraging the committee members to vote in alignment with your position. We also want to thank those folks on the committee for their time. So here we've provided a testimony format to follow as you're kind of pulling everything together. You can kind of fill in the blanks here if you'd like. And then on this next slide, I actually have an example of that. So in the pink, that is the greetings of the chairs in the committee. In salmon is the introduction of who you are and what you are testifying for or against. In light orange is the background on why this matters to you. So this is your story. Why is this issue so personal and important to you? In yellow, this is where you can use data to back up your story and demonstrate how this issue is impacting others. And then lastly, in green, you're going to restate your position on the bill and have that call to action that you want the committee to take. Summarizing the personal narrative you will share in your testimony is really important. Remember that you'll never have enough time to share your whole story. Your story can also and will change depending on what you are advocating for, as well as the audience you're speaking to. I also suggest that as you're practicing, share your script with someone else. Our stories are incredibly personal, and sometimes we are too close to it. Having an outside perspective can point to any areas where clarity is needed or other improvements. Okay, so you've gone through all the steps, you've prepared, testified. Now you can exhale and relax, but you may or may not be done. At the state level, the committee members are allowed to ask clarifying questions or follow-ups. This is not always the case for community members, but it does happen. So if a question is asked and you do not know the answer, that is totally okay. You can respond with, "I'm just here to share my experience," or if you would like to respond but don't have that information available in that moment, you can let the committee know that you'll follow up with additional information after the hearing. Do you want to know at the local level, though? A lot of times committee members are actually not permitted to respond during any public comment. And so just know that once you speak, that acknowledging that you are finished within that time frame, make sure, then you can just kind of move on, which is great. All right, and then so following up, regardless of whether they have questions, it's really helpful to either email your testimony to your elected officials, as well as formally submitting your testimony to the committee. If it is applicable, you may also want to follow up with elected officials before a vote on the policy you're advocating for. The next step is then accountability. How did your elected officials vote? If the policy was approved, keep an eye out to see when it's implemented and if it's doing what it was intended to do. Are there areas for improvement? These are observations that can be communicated to elected officials as well. So that about wraps up this workshop. I want to thank you for attending, and we hope that you leave here feeling prepared and ready to testify at a public hearing. Again, please do not hesitate to reach out with any questions or if the community engagement team can support you.